Welcome to Pasargadtv. My name is Bryon Wilfert, Member of Parliament for Richmond Hill. It's my pleasure to talk to you today about the Iranian Accountability Act, which put forth by my friend and colleague, the Honourable Irwin Coter. This act is going to, hopefully, if adopted by the government, will give a real voice to the issue of accountability when it comes to Iran. At the moment, and I was on the Subcommittee for Human Rights last month, where I spoke to government senior officials with regard to this act. At the moment, we see, for example, no freezing of Iranian assets in this country, either by government leaders or by business people. I think that this is absolutely critical, that we freeze those assets so they cannot be able to move money back and forth. The fact that this act will ensure that government officials are not able to travel. For example, earlier this year we had the then Vice President of Iran, come and do a so-called private visit to Canada. And yet many constituents aren't able to bring their loved ones to Canada for a visit, and yet the government allowed the former Vice President to come here on a so-called private visit, where he went to a number of cities and met with a number of individuals. We need to ensure that human rights, both in Iran and around the world, is maintained, and maintained in a very strong way. And this act gives that very strong walk, what we call walk the talk, where we're telling the government now, you must not only ensure the freezing of assets, you must also indicate very strongly to Iran that we are not going to be, in the international community, doing business with people who not only crack down on human rights in Iran, but brutalize their own people. And we have seen very tragic events. We still see the voice of opposition in many cities around Iran at the present time. And that is clearly because of the repressive nature of the regime and the fact that, as you know, on June the 12th, the election was stolen by the government. We've heard very disturbing reports by members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, including suggesting that they will be not only cracking down on opponents at home, but also those people who have given real voice to opposition abroad. This clearly is unacceptable, and as a Canadian Member of Parliament, we need to, in the strongest terms, not only crack down on that, but also restrict the kind of programming that we're seeing, where people are coming to Canada and setting up festivals and doing things on behalf of the Iranian government. And for me, that it could be a front, and probably is a front, for the kind of activity which would be able to crack down on individuals here. We've seen, of course, attacks and deaths, unfortunately, in places like France and the United States on dissidents. And again, this government, our government, has not been very, very clear when it comes to Iran. Yes, they've taken supposedly strong stands on places like Burma, the Prime Minister on China. But when it comes to Iran, I can't see how we would allow officials to be able to come here, how we allow people who clearly are moving money back and forth here, how we could allow a former Vice President here. This, to me, is not acceptable. And so Mr. Coter's bill is designed to really force the government to crack down on all of these areas. And it's important, not only important for people of Iranian descent, but for Canadians in general, to know that their government actually is doing something instead of simply talking about this issue. We are very disturbed, of course, about recent events in Iran. And again, we are seeing, again, more attacks on legitimate demonstrations. We see mock trials of people who clearly have been, including a former Vice President in Iran, who had said that this election was clearly rigged, and that they want to have legitimate elections held. And I'm sure that if they were held, the opposition would take power. But we make no illusions that the hand of the Iranian government is not only in Iran, but clearly around the world, and that is something which I think Canadians have to be much more vigilant about, and I think our government has to be much clearer. I take note of the fact that about 75% of my constituents who have relatives who apply at the embassy in Tehran are turned down. That is completely unacceptable, and of course the number of people turned down is the highest anywhere in the world for our embassies and high commissions. And I raised this in the last election, and again, I think that it's very disturbing to see that so many people are rejected on very flimsy grounds. And although sometimes we are able to provide additional information on behalf of our constituents, the number is completely out of skew with other embassies. And therefore, again, I appeal to our government to look more compassionately on legitimate visitors who want to come here and meet with their relatives. And if we don't do that, I think we are not doing ourselves a service, and we're not really living up to the Canadian creed in terms of human rights. So again, I appreciate you listening to me today. And again, what I am thinking that we should be doing is supporting this type of bill. I've sent out information on Irwin Coter's bill and on the subcommittee on human rights, where I must say that the answers that I received from government officials were really no better than the answers I received from the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So we're going to continue as the official opposition to put pressure on the Conservative government. And again, I thank you for watching.